So tonight we are exploring how to stay empowered in this time of chaos. If you watch the evening news, it is disheartening. Oh my God, there are endless wars and politicians that are at war with one another, and children that are starving and whole cities that are being burnt to the ground, and our earth is hurting. How can we not get caught in reaction to all of this? How can we become a part of the healing that is coming out of this time of chaos? Well, I want to take you to what I call the big picture. Um, our local news station used to have this thing that they would put on a picture, you know, and it was a picture of a beach somewhere or a tower somewhere, and you're supposed to guess where it is in the world, right? So let's imagine that in front of us is this picture of kind of some old crumbling buildings on the side of a hill. You don't know what it is, you know. And then you expand out like you do with Google Earth. You expand out a little bit more. Okay, crumbling buildings, lot of forest around it. Don't know what it is. Expand out a little bit more. Oh my God, there's a lot of jungle over there. Where could this be? You expand out a little bit more and you begin to see the Pacific Ocean. And then you begin to see the Atlantic Ocean and you begin to see the curve of South America. And you realize that that was a picture of Machu Picchu. And then you expand out even more and you realize that Machu Picchu is one little tiny spot on top of this beautiful, beautiful planet that is surrounded by oceans of space. A big picture can give you a perspective that allows you to be with all of this chaos in a new way. And so we're going to get into just a little bit of science. Stay with me, because this way of viewing what's happening right now on our planet it can be very useful. It brings deeper trust in the process and an ability to respond rather than react. Where I first learned this big picture was from the Catholic priest Thomas Berry and his sidekick, Brian Swim. Brian Swim is a professor at the Institute for the California Institute for Integral Studies in San Francisco. Thomas Berry was, they call him a cultural historian, but oh my God, that just is too dry. He was one of the most amazing perceivers of our time. And all of his work is about really weaving us back into the awareness that we are the earth, that we are a part of this greater process. And he and Brian wrote a book, The Universe Story. I think it was published in 1994, something along that line, which takes the whole story of the universe. And as Brian says, there's huge gaps that we don't yet understand, but from the Big Bang until where we are right now. And really wove us into that story. We are the molecules that first learn how to become a community of multi-cell beings. All of this creativity that's gone before us was necessary for us to exist. And then Brian made a documentary, the Journey of the Universe, and it won the 2011 Emmy for documentaries. So here are these two men that are opening up the field of our consciousness. We just live in such a narrow world. We think of ourselves as just human beings. We don't realize we are life. And all of the creativity that's gone before us has been necessary for us in order to exist. So what Thomas and Brian did, they were in Seattle in the 90s, and I had the wonderful grace to be with them. And they showed that this universe story is our story, and it's gone through many different shifts in evolution, just like you have. At one time, you were less than 2 feet tall, and you're probably taller than 2 feet by this point, right? And you went through so many changes. At one time, you couldn't lift up your head. And one time, you couldn't walk. One time, you couldn't run. One time, you couldn't speak. But slowly and surely, you evolved into who you are today. The same thing with the earth. And what Brian and Thomas did was that they created 12 major shifts of evolution in this universe story that is our story, and showed how, as the old way was dying and a new way was being born, there was always chaos because the old wants to hold on as the new begins to appear. It's always a windy time. You call evolutionary shifts, we could call them births. If you've ever been at the birth, if you ever birthed anybody, you see that this is a messy process. It's full of a lot of pain and pee and poop and blood and all that. But out comes this new being. And so what Brian and Thomas are saying is that what's coming out of this time of chaos is a new story, a new understanding of who we are and how we can relate to the earth in a way, in our fellow beings, all beings, insects, fish, animals, rocks, even rocks, relate to them in a way that heals this time of chaos. And so what they are basically saying is that life, I love this word, this is what Brian uses, that in life is always a coming together into increasing community. Now stay with me here. We're heading to something really good here. So at one time, there was just the stuff of the Big Bang. This is a very technical, scientific word stuff. And life, and Brian calls it allurement, brought the stuff together into a community called an atom. Then, over the eons, life brought together these atoms, and I'm not going to take you down the rabbit hole of how that all happens. It's very, very fascinating. But then life brought the atoms together into communities called molecules. And I know when you studied this in high school, molecules to me were these written symbols on a page. Now I know how alive molecules are. And then the molecules came together into communities called cells. And then cells came together into communities called multi-cell beings. And what Brian and Thomas are inviting us into is the understanding is that the next shift is happening in human consciousness. It's not happening atomically, molecularly, cellularly. That's all been the process up to this point. But life has finally created something, this frontal lobe, that can see life, that can explore life, that can celebrate life. But we've been caught in an old kind of mind that has caused such heartache on this planet. This old kind of mind is what I call the me kind of mind. It sees everything as objects. It sees a tree as an object for what it can be for you. It doesn't see that a tree is part of a greater whole. This old kind of mind is very judgmental. Think of all the hierarchical systems, the caste system in India, the whole idea that people with colored skin are less than people with white skin. This kind of mind has allowed us to rape the earth, to dominate other people, dominate women, dominate, make slaves out of, people that we see as less than. This kind of mind doesn't see, well, what Thomas says is this old kind of mind sees life as a collection of objects. The new kind of mind sees it as a communion of subjects. It sees that everything is alive, that everything is dependent upon all the creativity that has gone before. Everything is reliant on everything else for its survival. I mean, you would not be here if there hadn't been people that, you know, harvested wild grapes and then started, growing them and then passed them down through the centuries. And then your particular grape plant, somebody watered it, somebody tended it, somebody picked the grapes. The grapes were put in a I don't know what to call it, a tray. Somebody had built that tray. The trays were put on the truck. You wouldn't be here if it wasn't all those people that had mined rubber from the rubber trees, and now you have trees. You have tires for It just can go on and on and on. We have thought of ourselves as separate and alone, when in reality, we are more connected than we can possibly know. We are more beloved than we can possibly know. We are more necessary than we can possibly know. And that is what Brian and Thomas are saying, is that we are living in a time of transformation from this old kind of mind that is hierarchical, judgmental, feels it has a right. It's like Putin feels it has a right to go in and invade, Ukraine, and then not take any responsibility for the war. That's the old kind of mind. And so Brian introduced me to a evolutionary biologist called Elizabeth Sahtouris. And her take on the butterfly story really speaks to what we're talking about here. Here's a caterpillar, necessary part of the whole, is great food for a lot of birds, poops a lot, adds to the mix of goodness in the soil, but also is a incubator for the butterflies. So here are these caterpillars. They live a very limited life. They live on a couple of branches on a couple of trees their whole life. Then they go into a cocoon. And what Elizabeth says is that caterpillar turns into goo. And what the biologists say is out of that goo comes what they call imaginal cells. And those are the first forerunners of the butterfly. But remember, in every evolutionary shift, the old always fights for its survival. So they now understand that the goo kills the first wave of imaginal cells. And what that causes, the then appearing imaginal cells, is that they come together into a community that becomes stronger than the old urge to destroy it. And out of it comes a butterfly. And this creature is so different than the caterpillar. This gives it gives beauty. It pollinates its view. its view. It has a very wide view, whereas a caterpillar had a very tiny slice of life. The monarchs can fly from Canada to Mexico. Oh my God, that is just amazing. So what I am saying to you is that the old kind of mind on this planet that has caused untold heartache, so many wars, domestic violence, raping of women, starving of children, that old kind of mind is the goo. You and I are the imaginal cells. You and I are coming together tonight into a community to remind ourselves that we are the butterfly being born. So I want to talk about Trump for a few minutes here, and I want you to know I am not judging him. He is a necessary part of the process, just like caterpillars were a necessary part of the process. But he is a perfect representative of the old kind of mind. In fact, I have respect for his soul that he said, I will live this kind of life. And you can see he is a very judgmental person. He really loves to put people down. He is that old kind of mind that says, I am right and you are wrong. It's my way or the highway. You know, we're going to take over Greenland, even if it takes, military force, because we want Greenland. You know, that old kind of mind, that is what is happening. And he is, I saw the other day, in the 90s, PBS had ran The Power of Myth. I know many of you have heard it. The conversation with Joseph Campbell, the amazing professor at Sarah Lawrence, who wrote so much about myth, which our myths are our ways of trying to explain what this is all about. And he is just such an aware person. And this was a 6-part series of Joseph and Bill Moyers talking. And I happened to turn on the TV the other night as I crawled into bed. And I got the last few minutes of this 6 hours of The Power of Myth. And what Joseph was saying is, you have to respect Shiva. Shiva is a Hindu god that comes as a destroyer to make way for the new. And what Joseph said was that destruction is an absolutely necessary part of this process. And as the destruction comes, it makes way for becoming. Oh my God, I was just so thrilled that he said that word. That is what we're saying here. We're living in a time that looks like everything is breaking down, especially with what Trump is doing, politically, and, with the federal workers, and with taking us out of the World Health Organization and the aid organization and all that. And yet, can we frame it as a dying of the old, that he represents the goo, and you and I represent the imaginal cells? It's just, it makes all of this workable. And the question is this true? I mean, maybe it's not true, but I think the proof is in the pudding. When you begin to see yourself as a part of a greater process, you see that process has been unfolding for 13.7 billion years. And you have arisen out of all the creativity that's come before. One of my teachers once said, we're just hairy bags of seawater that have learned how to think. Or we could say you and I are the earth animated. And we have all taken on this old kind of mind. This old kind of mind, when you watch it inside of yourself, it's based on fear and it's glued together with judgment. And hello, Bodhi. Let's go. Yeah, you can go down the lap. There we go. To imagine, to not be such a victim to this process. I still have a hard time when I turn on the news and I hear something new, some hatchet has been, taken, something that seems very integral, like the, what's the name of the place that, works with, viruses and all that, and, and how we need to be ready for the next pandemic, and they're cutting that budget. Boy, my mind and my heart go, but then I realized that I am meeting that with the old kind of mind, with the mind of fear, with the mind of judgment. And so, what can we do? When we begin to see this amazing process we have arisen out of, when we begin to see that evolution is an ever evolving process, when we see we're right in the middle of a major transition that looks like it's a breakdown time, but really is a breakthrough time, we begin to realize we are the place where this breakthrough is happening. That which drops of water were not important to create the ocean. The ocean was made out of drops of water. This new kind of mind is made out of people, ordinary people like you and I, learning how to not get seduced in the old kind of mind, that to look at whoever you don't like, your boss or your next door neighbor or a politician, and rather than meeting them with fear or with judgment, we meet them with our aware heart. You can't do this if you can't see that this is a trustable process. How did life take stardust, for heaven's sakes? Stardust, and create the DNA molecule. And so what I'm talking about is a shift of perception. There's a wonderful movie that is one of my favorite movies, and it came out in 1990, and it's called Mind Walk, and it's a politician, an artist, and a scientist walking around the island of Mont Saint Michel. And this was based on Fitzgerald Capra's book, The Turning Point, who he was an amazing physicist. And so they're walking around this island. If you've never seen it, Mont Saint Michel is an island when the tide comes in. And it has this medieval abbey on the top of it. And then all down the side of it is draped these a village that got made around the abbey, and this all made out of stone from the island of Mont Saint Michel. Oh my God, it's just, go look at it online, look for pictures of when the tide comes in. And so here, this politician, this scientist, and this artist walk around, and they talk about where we are in evolution. And I want to read to you one part of that movie. And this is when the physicist is talking to the politician. We are destroying rainforests at a rate of 1 football field per second. Brazil is doing this in order to pay their national debt through money raised from cattle, ranches, and land speculations. The barren forests are one of the main causes of global warming. We create cattle ranches in order to produce more red meat, which is one of the direct causes of heart attacks and high medical costs. These are examples of the interconnectedness. You cannot look at a single one of our global problems in isolation, trying to understand and solve it. You can fix a fragment of a piece, but it will deteriorate a second later because what it was connected to has been ignored. But he's saying you try to get Brazil not to cut down the rainforest, but then you really need to work with people eating way too much beef, so on and so forth. We have to change everything at the same time. They were standing on this, looking out at the sea, standing on this ledge on Mont Saint Michel. And the politician says, well, suppose you are right and everything is connected to everything else. Where do you start? And the physicist says, by the way you see the world. You are still searching for the right piece to fix first. All the problems are a fragment of one single crisis, a crisis of perception. That's what we're talking about here. Life is inviting you and I to grow up out of this old kind of mind and come into this me kind of mind that sees the sacredness of every single particle, sees the uniqueness, the necessity that we're all one being. This is all one being. So then Thich Nhat Hanh, the very beloved, Buddhist, who was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. He says, it is my conviction that we cannot change the world if we're not able to change our way of thinking, our consciousness. Collective change in our way of thinking and seeing things is crucial. Without it, we cannot expect the world to change. So what I'm offering you is a shift of perception, of seeing yourself not as separate and isolated, not getting caught in this old kind of mind that's based on fear and glued together with judgment. To see yourself as a part of this awakening process, that of all the possible human lives you could have lived, this is the life that you are living. So what can we do? I think the first most important thing is to catch yourself either judging or fearing what is going on. Whether it's a person or an idea of what's going to happen in the future, oh my God. I mean, it seems like, Trump is creating much more chaos. They're now talking about recession and so on and so forth. Can we not react to that? Can we see that he is Shiva? He is playing a role. It's like Joseph said, Shiva comes to destroy in order to make space for becoming. Wow. So inside of you, it really starts with you. That you, just like drops of water made the ocean, drops of collective consciousness, of beginning to see what Thomas and Brian and I am inviting you into, that makes a difference. You may not see a lot of change in your lifetime, but oh my God, I heard Sister Miriam McGillis, this was sometime in the 90s, and she was talking about this, that being the healing that is asking to come out of this. And she said, and you may not see the fruits of your labor in your lifetime. And she said in the Middle East, they plant date trees and they will never eat the fruit of those trees because it takes 80 years for dates to grow and send their roots down deep enough into the earth that they can finally create dates. You plant date trees because of your vision for the future. And so besides really working inside of you, not judging how much your mind talks about fear, not judging how much your mind judges, but become smarter than it. Recognize that is just the clouds of the separate self, that who you are is so much more than that me kind of mind that has kind of taken over so many people on this planet. The other thing that you can do is really begin to listen. I think listening is just so essential. Give yourself the gift of every day for at least a couple of minutes to get outside. And even if you only have a little tiny park a block away with a tree, or you have, like I have, forest, really close to me, go be in the forest. Recognize that the birds, the trees, the fungus, the ferns, they are all kin. That you are an animated part of life, and you are maturing to the place where you can live, maybe not all the time, from this new kind of mind. That's why you're on this tonight, is because life is calling to you. Life is calling to you to plant date trees all over your life. Find little moments. Find where the grocery store clerk is being grumpy, and instead of reacting to her grumpiness, you smile at her. When you're caught in rush hour traffic, instead of getting tight, you just take some long, deep breaths and realize life is giving you this opportunity to slow down. And all of a sudden your heart opens and you can just feel all the other people in the cars around you. And most of them are caught in that old kind of mind. And you send this new kind of mind, which is based in the heart. Those moments make a difference. That you can become a part of the healing that is coming out of this time. This is an inner revolution. Most revolutions are against something. I really ask you to live this inner revolution, not against. If you go out and protest, don't do it against. Do it for. If you think of a politician you really don't like, see if you can catch yourself and instead send him your heart or her your heart. Thank them for playing that role in the great scheme of things. So I want to end with a all-time favorite quote from Thomas Berry. And he really, in this paragraph, is kind of a summation of what I've offered to you tonight. And he says, if the dynamics of the universe from the very beginning shaped the course of the heavens, lighted the sun, and formed the earth, if this same dynamism brought forth the continents and the seas and the atmosphere, if it awakened life in the primordial cell and then brought into being the unnumbered variety of living beings, and finally brought us human beings into being and guided us safely through the turbulent centuries, then there is reason to believe that this same guiding force is precisely what has awakened in us, in our present understanding, in this new understanding we've been exploring tonight, understanding of who we are and what this process is. So that was me, but I'll go back to Thomas now. So that this same guiding process is precisely what has awakened inside of us this present understanding of ourselves and our relation to this stupendous process called life. Sensitized to such guidance from the very structure and functioning of the universe, we can have confidence in the future that awaits the human venture. Wow. That you and I don't have to get drugged down into the fear of this time of change. We don't have to get drugged down. The goo of the old mind is trying to kill us imaginal cells, that we can gather together into communities and we can begin to live the butterflyness of this new kind of mind based on the trust that there's something much, much, much smarter than us that took stardust, for heaven's sakes, and created the DNA molecule. And all you do is just change one of the four bases and you get an octopus, and you change another one and you get a giraffe, and you change another one and you get a baobab tree. What is that intelligence? I am saying to you that hopefully what I've framed for you tonight is a way that you can trust this process enough, even though it's extremely unlikable. It's very scary. Of course, it's very scary. But that we can frame it in a way that keeps us more on an even keel, so that we can maneuver through our life in a way that enhances the we kind of mind rather than supporting the all.